our disgusting boy named Juho Nam lives the life as a filthy temporary worker who spends his time slaving away at a local convenience store. He covers the afternoon shift 3 times a week for 5 hours at a stretch. While minimum wage only brings in about $50 a day, he still finds a sense of pride in his simple occupation. There are certainly better paying jobs with fewer hours available, but Juho has a very specific reason for remaining exactly where he is. That reason is a captivating woman named Ruri, who joined the staff just 2 months ago. Even though she is only 22 and just a year older than him, her presence completely derails his focus. She has a way of leaning over the counter to ask his opinion on new snacks that makes his heart race and his face turn a bright shade of red. When she catches him staring or spacing out, she playfully warns him that he will never find a girlfriend if he stays lost in his own world. Juho tries to maintain his dignity by claiming he has actually dated many people before, but Ruri just laughs and dismisses his stories as nothing more than a dream. Her vibrant personality and constant teasing leave him perpetually flustered behind the register. He finds himself caught between wanting to prove his experience and simply being happy to be in her company, while she grins at his awkwardness. As he finishes his shift and walks down the quiet hallways toward his apartment, his thoughts turn more realistic. He reflects on how all he has ever done is study hard and transition straight into working during college. The honest truth is that he doesn't have a girl in his life because there is simply no time in his busy schedule for a social life. He accepts this as his current reality while reaching for the door handle and entering his home. The moment the door creaks open, the quiet is shattered by very loud and sussy sounds echoing from the bedroom. Juho stands frozen for a moment as he witnesses a scene that has clearly become a recurring theme in his living situation. His roommate is quite busy with a guest, and the two of them seem completely unfazed by his sudden arrival. While the woman offers a cheerful greeting as if nothing unusual is happening, Juho can only offer a heavy sigh and wonder why he has to encounter this cardio site once again. He realizes he is the only one in the room who feels any sense of exhaustion or awkwardness as he watches them carry on with their evening. The frustration finally reaches a boiling point for Juho as he informs the couple that they need to finish their business and vacate the premises immediately. He even suggests they open a window on their way out to clear the air. These two are actually his college classmates who have made a habit of using his apartment as their cardio session spot simply because they are too broke to afford a proper private place. The pair consists of Bakha Choi and Chodan Min, and their complete lack of boundaries is starting to weigh heavily on his sanity. As Juho tries to recover his composure with a simple carton of milk, Chodan casually asks why he does not just join in on the fun with Bakha. The sheer absurdity of the question causes Juho to lose his grip entirely, leading to a very ungraceful fountain of milk spraying across the room. Chodan continues as if everything is perfectly normal, insisting that his partner is lovely and that Juho is more than welcome to participate in their cardio activities. Juho realizes he is trapped in a conversation with people who possess truly eccentric sensibilities, especially when they double down on the offer by claiming he is exactly their type. Bakha plays right along with the suggestion, wondering aloud if Juho finds her unattractive while she makes a very bold and sussy move toward him. Chodan even brings up seeing Juho in the gym locker room as a strange justification for why he would be a great addition to their group. This is the final straw for Juho, who feels his internal temperature rising to a boiling point. He eventually snaps and shouts at the top of his lungs for them to leave his home this very second. The quiet night air is filled with the sound of his outburst as he is finally left alone in the aftermath of their chaotic visit. Now alone, Juho gets down on his knees to clean up the spilled milk and the various tissues left behind by his guests. He acknowledges that they are generally nice people, but he cannot wrap his head around their very public and sussy relationship dynamics. He struggles to understand the logic of a couple who thrives on such strange and open displays of affection involving others. As he tosses a crumpled tissue into the bin, he feels a pang of self-pity, reflecting on the irony of being a perfectly normal single man while those with such odd habits are happily coupled up. Just as he is starting to settle into the quiet, the doorbell interrupts his thoughts, and he wonders who could possibly be visiting at such a late hour. He opens the door to find his longtime childhood friend, Juian, who also happens to live in the apartment right next door. They have been close since their early school days, but the look on her face tells him that his timing is absolutely terrible. He realizes far too late that he is standing there in nothing but his underwear, holding a wet wad of tissues, while a suspicious puddle of white liquid sits prominently on the floor behind him. Juian points toward the mess with a silent look of deep judgment, leaving Juho to realize that he has absolutely no way to explain this scene without sounding like a complete disaster. Juian stares at the suspicious scene before her and immediately jumps to the most logical but entirely incorrect conclusion about how Juho spends his sussy time. She remarks that while he is free to enjoy whatever cardio videos he likes, he should really consider the fact that the walls are thin enough for her to hear everything from her own room. Juho frantically tries to explain that the situation is a massive misunderstanding and that things are not at all what they seem, but she simply offers a knowing smirk and dismisses his excuses as the typical lies of a man caught in the act. The situation takes a turn for the worse when she begins to playfully investigate the room by sniffing the air with a sussy grin. She claims that her nose can lead her to the exact spot where he engaged in his alleged cardio activities, and even suggests he owes her a drink if she manages to find it. Juho realizes, with a sinking heart, that the room actually does have a sussy scent because of the intense cardio session held by his classmates just moments before. He desperately tries to wave the air around to clear the evidence, but Juian is convinced she is on the right track. She eventually corners him with a look of deep judgment, wondering if his usual habits have finally reached a level of desperation that he can no longer control. Before he can find the words to properly defend his honor, she decides that a simple scolding is not enough for such a blatant display of indecency. She calls him a hopeless disgrace and delivers a sharp, stinging slap across his face that echoes through the apartment. Juho is left alone once again, nursing a bright red handprint on his cheek and wondering how his childhood friend can be so quick to resort to violence. As he sits on the floor with a cold drink, he reflects on the absurdity of his life and the duality of Juian. He acknowledges that she has a very cute face, but her aggressive personality makes him wonder who would ever be brave enough to date someone so unpredictable. His thoughts wander toward the concept of love and whether finding a partner would actually make his daily existence more satisfying, or if it would just add more chaos to his already complicated the world. This moment of deep reflection is suddenly shattered by the loud and aggressive buzzing of a massive hornet that has found its way into the room. Juho is gripped by a sudden panic and begins to flail his arms wildly to avoid being stung, leading to a very ungraceful slip on the remaining wet spots on the floor. He loses his balance entirely and goes flying toward the balcony door, crashing into it with enough force to send him sprawling amidst a pile of shattered glass and debris. As he sits up and tries to figure out how he survived such a disastrous fall, his eyes wander upward and land on a sight that leaves him completely frozen. Standing right in front of him is Juian, who looks just as shocked and mortified as he feels. She is caught in a state of extreme sussy state, wearing nothing but a thin white shirt and a pair of very colorful, strawberry-patterned cloth. Juho finds himself in a state of complete confusion as he stares at Juian, momentarily forgetting that he is the one who just came crashing through her balcony door. He wonders why she is standing there in such a sussy outfit, but the reality of the situation quickly sets in when she reminds him with a very angry expression that he is currently in her home. The tension in the air is thick as Juho tries to deflect the awkwardness by labeling her a disgrace for her choice of clothing. This attempt to shift the blame backfires spectacularly as Juian reaches for a heavy object with a look of pure determination. She informs him that she is the one who should be complaining before launching the projectile with enough force to send it flying through the air. The object hits Juho squarely in the forehead with a loud thud, causing his vision to swim as he feels a wave of dizziness wash over him. The world around him fades into a blur of colors before everything goes dark, and he slips into an unconscious daze. While he is out cold, his mind retreats into a very vivid and strange dream world where the rules of reality no longer apply. In this dream, Juian appears before him with a soft and apologetic expression, appearing much more gentle than she ever is in real life. She leans in close and offers a sincere apology for hurting him, even suggesting that he might want a taste of her in a way that makes his heart race even in his sleep. Just as the dream reaches a peak of absolute absurdity, a bright light breaks through the darkness. Juho wakes up with a start and realizes that he is lying in a bed that definitely does not belong to him. He looks around and sees Juian sitting nearby, now wearing a yellow cardigan over her white shirt and looking much more composed than before. She notices that he is finally awake and tells him to just relax, though she seems a bit worried about the state of his injury. Juho reaches up to touch his forehead and feels a sharp ache where the object struck him, and the memory of her throwing it comes rushing back. He attempts to glare at her for her violent behavior, but she maintains her ground by reminding him that his rude comments were the reason she lost her temper in the first place. They eventually agree to call their grievances even for the time being, as there are much larger problems to deal with in the room. Juho's eyes land on a massive bag of debris sitting near the balcony, and he realizes that his dramatic entrance has caused some serious structural damage. Juian explains that the bag contains what is left of the wall that used to separate their two balconies. They both stand up and walk toward the wreckage, looking out at the giant hole that now links their apartments together. The entire privacy barrier has been reduced to a pile of broken concrete and dust, leaving them with a very open and shared living space. Juho is gripped by a new sense of panic as he asks if she has managed to contact the landlord about the disaster. Juian confirms that she made the call while he was passed out. Juian manages to get the landlord on the phone and finds the woman relaxing under a palm tree on a tropical beach, somewhere far away. The landlord seems entirely unbothered by the news of a literal wall collapsing in her building and casually tells Juian not to worry about it because she will take care of the repairs whenever she eventually returns from her vacation. This leaves the two neighbors in a very awkward position as they realize they are now forced to live with a giant shared opening between their private spaces for the foreseeable future. Juian immediately tries to establish some boundaries by warning Juho that he better not even think about peeking into her room while the wall is gone. She admits with a blush that she usually prefers to wear nothing but a light shirt when she is at home, and her privacy is now at a very high risk. Juho tries to act cool by laughing off the idea and claiming that he wouldn't bother looking at her body even if someone paid him a large sum of money. This predictable insult results in yet another physical outburst from Juian, who delivers a sharp blow to his head as she reminds him that her patience for his rudeness is wearing thin. As Juho sits on the floor, nursing his latest injury, he thinks back to their school days and remembers how she was always as strong as a wild gorilla. He can't help but notice how much she has changed since they were kids, and he quietly admits to himself that she has actually grown up to be quite pretty in her own way. That night, his subconscious mind takes over again, and he finds himself trapped in another vivid dream involving Juian in a very compromising and sussy state. The dream is so intense that he wakes up feeling completely drained, and he heads to his shift at the convenience store looking like a total zombie. Ruri immediately notices his tired eyes and leans in to playfully whisper that he must have spent the whole night engaged in some very specific sussy activities instead of sleeping. Juho is startled by her sudden appearance and tries to explain himself, but he is interrupted when Juian walks through the front doors of the shop. He is stunned to see her on his professional turf, and they share an awkward moment of recognition that doesn't go unnoticed by his coworker. Ruri picks up on the strange tension instantly and begins to interrogate him with a very sussy stare once his neighbor leaves the counter. She wants to know if he has feelings for the pretty girl who just walked out, and Juho tries to brush it off as a simple childhood friendship that ended up at the same college by total coincidence. Ruri isn't convinced by his dismissive attitude and continues to poke fun at his obvious nervousness while leaning sussily over the counter. She mentions that he shouldn't be so modest because anyone can be curious about those kinds of things, and then she asks if he would like to see what she is wearing for her cardio outfit. Juho is completely blindsided by Ruri's bold invitation, his face turning a deep shade of crimson as he tries to process whether she is actually being serious. Ruri leans across the counter with a calculated and sussy grace, her movements intentional as she watches his heart rate climb and his composure crumble. He finds himself unable to look away, eventually admitting his curiosity with a faint and embarrassed affirmation that only serves to fuel her playful spirit. However, the heavy tension is broken instantly by a burst of loud and unapologetic laughter as Ruri reveals that she was merely playing with his emotions once again. Juho realizes, with a heavy heart, that he has fallen into yet another one of her carefully crafted traps, and he reflects on how easily he is swayed by her antics. He remembers all the previous occasions where she used her charms to trick him, such as the time she complained about the heat just to get a rise out of him, or the moment she pretended to drop a coin on the floor just to witness his awkward struggle for words. He feels like a complete idiot for believing that a woman as captivating as Ruri would ever be serious about such a sussy offer. To make matters even worse, she quickly captures his humiliated expression on her phone, adding another embarrassing photo to her growing collection while he tries to gather the scattered remains of his dignity. After Ruri eventually heads off to handle the inventory with a triumphant grin, Juho is left alone in the quiet aisles to reflect on his unfortunate streak of bad luck. His mind inevitably wanders back to the chaotic events of the previous night, as he is still unable to shake the image of Juian and the colorful strawberry pattern situation that started his current spiral of confusion. Just as he attempts to settle into the routine of his shift and clear his thoughts, Ruri reappears and tosses a small, light object in his direction without any warning. He catches it instinctively, but his breath hitches as he looks down to see a pair of delicate black cardio cloth resting in his palms, leaving him more shocked and flustered than he has ever been in his entire life. Ruri watches with a predatory grin as Juho stands frozen with the black cardio cloth in his hands, clearly enjoying every second of his utter confusion. She asks him to take a wild guess as to who the owner might be, but Juho can only gulp in silence as his face turns an even deeper shade of red. She casually mentions that the item is a gift to make up for her previous prank and tells him that he better take good care of it. Juho stares at the delicate fabric, wondering if this is a genuine gesture or if his coworker is currently executing the most elaborate psychological trick in the history of convenience store employment. He eventually convinces himself that she is likely just trying to bait him into another embarrassing reaction by giving him a brand new item from the store shelf. Once he finally finishes his tasks in the back, Juho steps out into the main shop, only to find a surprisingly hostile atmosphere at the front counter. Ruri and Juian are locked in a silent and icy standoff that makes the entire room feel like a pressure cooker. Ruri is visibly fuming, her face contorted in a rare display of genuine anger as she stares down his neighbor. Juho wonders if Juian was being a particularly rude customer or if there is some deeper tension he doesn't understand. Before a single word can be exchanged to clear the air, Juian offers a final look of cold judgment and marches out of the store, leaving a very frustrated Ruri behind the register. Ruri immediately turns her interrogation toward Juho, wanting to know exactly how well he knows the woman who just left. Juho tries to keep things simple by explaining that they have been friends since they were kids and just happened to end up at the same college, but Ruri is clearly not satisfied with such a mundane answer. She remarks on how cool and composed Juian seemed, which only seems to fuel her own competitive spirit. Without any warning, she grabs Juho by the arm and drags him back toward the storage room, ignoring his frantic inquiries about where they are going and why she is being so aggressive. The heavy door slams shut with a loud bang, leaving Juho trapped in the cramped space as his internal alarm bells begin to ring at maximum volume. Ruri stands close to him, her expression shifting back to a mischievous and sussy confidence as she brings up the black cardio cloth again. She asks him one last time to guess who they belong to, and when Juho desperately suggests that they must just be inventory from the store, she gives him a triumphant look. She reveals the shocking truth by confirming the items are indeed hers, and proceeds to provide an undeniable and very sussy proof of ownership that leaves Juho completely paralyzed with shock. She leans in, her eyes sparkling with a mix of sussiness, as she informs him that because he finally got the answer right, he has earned himself a very special prize. Then they started a cardio session. The atmosphere in the cramped storage room reaches a fever pitch when the sudden chime of the entrance bell sends Juho into a state of absolute terror. He realizes with a start that a customer has arrived and frantically insists that they need to leave their hiding spot immediately. Ruri remains completely unfazed by the potential for a scandal and tries to calm his nerves by suggesting that everything is fine. She leans in and tells him that any visitor will simply leave if they stay perfectly quiet, even going so far as to suggest they should continue their cardio session one more time. Juho is practically vibrating with anxiety as he argues that the situation is definitely not okay, but he finds himself paralyzed by her bold proximity and the sound of her sussy breathing. Just as Juho feels his heart might actually leap out of his chest, the loud click of the door handle signals the end of his piece and the likely end of his professional reputation. The door swings open to reveal a striking woman with long dark hair and glasses who radiates an aura of extreme authority. Juho realizes he is well and truly cooked as she peers into the room with a look of deep, silent judgment. Ruri quickly tries to regain her composure and adjust herself, but the newcomer's icy stare makes it clear that she is not fooled by their frantic attempt to look busy. The air in the store turns freezing as the two women lock eyes in a silent battle of wills that leaves Juho feeling like a spectator at a high-stakes duel. He attempts to offer a weak explanation about how they were simply organizing the stock, though his bright red face and trembling voice do nothing to support his claim. Ruri tries to assert some dominance by informing the stranger that the storage room is strictly for staff only and that she needs to leave. The mystery woman merely offers a mocking smirk and wonders aloud what the reaction would be if she actually belonged in the store as a member of the staff herself. This cryptic statement leaves both Juho and Ruri in a state of stunned confusion as they watch the woman walk out to the main counter with total confidence. The mystery is solved in the most stressful way possible when she casually takes a seat and reveals the devastating truth that she is the brand new manager of the convenience store. Juho can only stand there and gulp in silence as he reflects on the sheer bad luck of being caught in a sussy situation by his new boss on her very first day. The manager makes no effort to hide her disapproval as she surveys her new domain with a critical eye. She swipes a finger across the counter and pointedly remarks on how incredibly dirty the premises have become, leaving the implication of their storage room antics hanging heavily in the air. She turns her piercing gaze toward Juho and demands to know his name, causing him to nervously confirm his identity while praying for the floor to swallow him whole. After a helpful assistant whispers his full name into her ear, the manager stares him down and asks exactly when his shift is supposed to end. Juho weakly informs her that he is finished at 5 o'clock. The manager checks her phone and notes that it is already 5 minutes past 5, signaling that the workday is officially over for some. She gives Juho the green light to head home, but immediately turns her attention back to Ruri with a stern order to stay behind and scrub the place until it sparkles. Juho is completely taken aback by this sudden shift in authority and even tries to offer a helping hand to his coworker because he hates to see her struggle alone. However, Ruri stops him in his tracks with a firm hand and a cold look, insisting that he just get going while promising to explain the situation at a later time. The manager watches this awkward interaction with a smug sense of satisfaction as Juho finally beats a hasty retreat from the store, far away from the fluorescent lights of the convenience store. Juian settles into her home office as the sunset paints the sky in shades of orange. It turns out she leads a secret life as a writer, spending her evenings frantically scribbling away at a sussy drama about a tearful breakup. She leans back in her chair with a heavy sigh and a look of deep contemplation, wondering how she is supposed to properly describe the complex feelings of a couple when she has never actually had a partner in her entire life. She decides that a cold can of beer is exactly what she needs to break through her creative block and hopefully help her finish the story smoothly. Back at the shop, the atmosphere is still incredibly tense as Ruri aggressively wipes down the counter with a look of pure resentment on her face. The silence of the night is broken by the familiar chime of the door as the manager returns to check on the progress of the cleaning. Ruri finally reaches her breaking point and demands to know why the older woman is going to such extreme lengths to make her life difficult. She reflects on how absurd it is for someone to appear out of nowhere and take over the management of a random store just to follow her around. The manager remains perfectly calm and asserts that there is nothing wrong with a manager wanting her place of business to be clean, but Ruri is convinced that this is nothing more than a targeted campaign of harassment. As the tension between them reaches a peak, Ruri lets out a frustrated sigh and tells the manager that she is being incredibly annoying, finally revealing the shocking truth that her boss is actually her own mother. The previous manager of the convenience store reflects on the incredible stroke of luck that allowed her to sell the business for a massive sum, feeling as though she had truly won the lottery with a payout reaching $1 million. While she celebrates her newfound freedom and plans to never cross paths with her former life again, Juho is back at his apartment, lying on his bed and trying to process the absolute whirlwind of his day. His mind is a chaotic mess of disbelief as he reflects on the intense and unexpected cardio he shared with Ruri, struggling to accept that such a vivid experience actually took place in the middle of a workday. The quiet of his evening is interrupted by a firm knock on the door, leading him to find his neighbor and childhood friend, Juian, standing there with a bright smile and a bag full of drinks. She steps into his room with a casual familiarity and asks if he is currently busy, though Juho quickly assures her that everything is fine as they settle down on the floor for an impromptu drinking session. As they crack open their beers and share some snacks, Juho realizes that this is the very first time she has ever invited him to have a drink together, which adds a strange layer of novelty to their usual dynamic. Juian eventually mentions that she has been struggling to focus on her writing script, a confession that briefly confuses Juho until she shifts the conversation toward his social life. She pointedly asks if he is close with the girl she saw him with at the store, her gaze lingering on him with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. This direct line of questioning causes Juho's brain to short-circuit as he is instantly hit with a flood of memories from his storage room encounter with Ruri. He tries to offer a vague and non-committal response about their relationship, but his internal panic becomes impossible to hide when his body betrays him with a sudden and very obvious sussy reaction. Juian notices the sussy sign immediately and stares at him with a look of pure shock and judgment, wondering what could have possibly triggered such a reaction. Juho frantically tries to claim that it is all a massive misunderstanding and that he was simply thinking about something else entirely, but Juian isn't buying his excuses for a second. The tension escalates into a heated argument about whether or not he finds her attractive, leading Juian to make a bold and incredibly sussy proposal to settle the matter once and for all. She suggests a game where they will take turns preparing cloths, and the first person to show a visible sign of sussiness will be declared the loser and forced to grant the winner a wish. Later, he lost and they started a cardio session. The high-stakes cardio session between childhood friends is suddenly interrupted by a thunderous knocking at the door that sends both Juho and Juian into a state of absolute panic. They realize with a start that someone is calling Juho's name from the hallway while they are both standing in the middle of the room. Juho is gripped by a sudden terror as he recognizes the voice of Ruri, who sounds perfectly cheerful and entirely unaware of the sussy scene taking place just a few feet away. Inside the apartment, the atmosphere turns into a frantic scramble as Juho tries to figure out how to hide a whole human being in a matter of seconds. He eventually decides that the balcony is the only viable option and ushers a very disgruntled Juian out into the night air, ignoring her silent looks of betrayal as he slams the door shut behind her. Juho takes a moment to try and compose himself, but his face is still bright red and dripping with nervous sweat as he finally reaches for the door handle. He opens the door to find Ruri standing there with a playful grin, and he is momentarily speechless as she explains that she managed to track down his address by questioning the store's previous manager. Without waiting for a proper invitation, she steps into his private domain and begins to scan the room with the calculated curiosity of a fox. She notices the bag of empty beer cans and snacks left over from his earlier session with Juian and remarks that his home is surprisingly clean for a guy living on his own. Ruri makes herself perfectly comfortable by sitting on his bed and inviting him to join her, leaving Juho to wonder how his evening managed to get even more complicated. The playful energy eventually shifts into something far more serious as Ruri begins to share the story of her past. She reveals that she actually ran away from home during her high school years and found herself struggling to survive in a world that was often cold and dangerous. She reflects on the people who tried to trick her and the altercations she had to win just to stay safe before she finally found a sense of stability at the convenience store. She looks at Juho with a rare moment of genuine vulnerability and admits that his honest and kind nature was exactly what she needed to see in another person. She explains that he is the only one she feels comfortable joking with or sharing her deepest concerns with. Just as Juho is moved by her sincerity, Ruri decides to prove her trust in the most direct way possible. She stands up, looking him straight in the eye, while asking him to trust her one more time as the tension in the room reaches a point of no return. Then they started a cardio session. Several days have passed since the chaotic events of that very awkward night, and Juho is currently feeling the sting of being ignored by his childhood friend. He sits on a park bench, staring at his phone in a state of mild despair as he looks at the long list of unanswered messages he sent to Juyeon. It seems like their long history is slowly fading away, leaving him to sigh in loneliness as he realizes that she might never talk to him again. His moment of self-pity is suddenly interrupted by a very familiar and commanding presence that makes his heart skip a beat for all the wrong reasons. He looks up to find the convenience store manager standing before him, looking as sharp and intimidating as ever. She mentions that she is glad to have found him and asks if he has some free time to talk, which leaves Juho pointing at himself in total confusion while wondering why his boss would be tracking him down in a public park. Before he can even process the situation, he is whisked away to a massive mansion that looks like it belongs to a billionaire. Juho can hardly believe his eyes as he takes in the sight of a shimmering outdoor pool and a luxury car that costs more than his entire life savings. The interior of the home is just as stunning, featuring modern furniture and high ceilings that make his own cramped living situation feel even more pathetic. He sits awkwardly on a couch and tries to make sense of why he has been invited into such a private and wealthy domain. The manager has since transitioned into a dark floral robe and sits across from him while elegantly sipping on a cup of tea. Juho finally gathers enough courage to ask why they are there, and she explains that she needed a quiet place to discuss something important without the risk of being seen by others. When Juho mentions that his own apartment was right next to the park they were just at, she realizes she completely forgot about that logical option and offers a small blush of embarrassment. She quickly moves past the mistake by noting that it all worked out since she was able to take a shower and get into something more comfortable. The atmosphere remains thick with tension as she sets down her tea and tosses a small white bag in his direction. Juho catches the item with a look of sheer bewilderment, but his expression quickly shifts to absolute shock as he peers inside. He finds himself staring at massive stacks of cash that make his head spin with disbelief. He wonders out loud why she would give him such a ridiculous amount of money, stuttering through his words as he tries to wrap his head around his sudden change in fortune. The manager stands up and reveals that she wants him to do a very specific favor for her in return for this generous gift. She looks him straight in the eye and tells him that his time working at the convenience store needs to come to an end immediately. Juho is left completely stunned, wondering if he accidentally offended her or if this is just a very expensive way to get fired. She tells him not to worry because he hasn't done anything wrong and explains that the money is meant to cover his tuition and a whole lot more. Juho can only gulp in silence as he looks down at the cash, realizing that his simple life as a part-time worker has just taken an incredibly strange and suspicious turn. Juho is currently convinced that he has hit the absolute jackpot. He springs up from the couch and offers a very loud and enthusiastic thanks for her incredible generosity. However, his excitement quickly gets the better of him as he loses his footing and goes crashing toward the floor with enough force to send the stacks of cash flying through the air like a paper blizzard. As the bills flutter down around the room, Juho finds himself lying on the ground in a very awkward position right at the manager's feet. The manager looks down at him with a mix of confusion and irritation, wondering what on earth he is doing and if his clumsy display is some kind of strange rejection of her offer. She assumes that he is acting like he doesn't need any money at all, which causes her to feel a bit offended after her display of pity toward a struggling student. She stands over him and remarks that he is being quite rude which is the exact moment that Juho's pride finally reaches its breaking point. The word poor resonates in his head and ignites a fire of sudden defiance as he realizes she knows absolutely nothing about his true character. He snaps at the idea that she could judge him so easily just because she happens to be wealthy and successful. He even goes so far as to stomp his foot on the scattered bills while declaring that he doesn't need her money at all. He informs her that he is willing to quit his job, but only if she gives him what he truly desires instead of a bag of cash. With a look of pure determination, he points directly at her and clarifies that the prize he wants is the store manager herself. Juho reflects on the logic that cash can be spent in an instant, but having the whole store to himself would be a far more sustainable investment. The manager is clearly taken aback by his sudden boldness and finds his confidence quite amusing, as she wonders if he really has what it takes to handle such a high-stakes request. She tells him not to underestimate her expectations and warns him that he better be able to satisfy her cardio needs properly if they are going to make this deal work. Juho is fully committed to the challenge and realizes that the path to becoming the new manager involves proving his worth right here and now. He lunges forward with a sudden burst of energy and starts a cardio session. Later, Juho suddenly realizes that his words came out all wrong and tries to clarify that he didn't mean to ask for the manager in such a sussy way. The manager is not about to let him off the hook and points out that he cannot simply take back such a daring statement after acting so confident just moments ago. She rises from the couch and reminds him that he was the one who insisted on having her instead of the literal bag of cash she offered. She decides that, since he got exactly what he asked for, he needs to hold up his end of the bargain by quitting his job at the convenience store immediately. She calmly informs him that her secretary is already waiting outside to give him a ride home and offers a final sussy smile while noting how much fun the whole ordeal was. Juho is left standing there in a complete and total daze as he tries to process the chaotic reality of his evening. Sometime later, Juian is sitting in a sunlit cafe while her editor looks over her latest manuscript with a very critical and judging eye. The editor is a blunt woman who clearly does not believe in sugarcoating her opinions, and she eventually leans in to ask a very direct question about whether Juian has any actual cardio experience in her real life. Juian is instantly mortified as she realizes her secret about having zero experience is being called out so publicly. The editor explains that it is nearly impossible to write a convincing story about relationships without actually living through those feelings for oneself. However, the editor admits that there was one specific part of the draft that was surprisingly impressive. She highlights the section where the female character hesitates for a long moment before making a cardio move, and notes how authentic and realistic that specific detail felt to a reader. She tells Juian that if she can manage to write the rest of the story with that same level of emotional depth, they might be able to discuss turning her work into an entire series. Juian heads back to her private sanctuary while humming a cheerful tune and dreaming about the possibility of turning her story into a massive series. She reflects on the authenticity of the real thing compared to the words on her pages, but eventually flops onto her bed with a heavy sigh of frustration. She realizes that despite her best efforts, she still does not truly understand the deep feelings she is trying to describe. She decides to conduct a bit of solo research to see if she can find that missing spark, but she quickly discovers that her usual routine feels entirely different now. Her mind keeps drifting back to the intense thumping of her heart from her earlier encounter, leaving her more confused than ever about why a simple touch could feel so surprisingly good. Across the way, Juho is having a minor crisis of his own as he sits at his desk and frantically scribbles down his conflicting thoughts. He struggles with the idea of quitting his job, especially since it means breaking his promise to Ruri, and he realizes he is not even sure if his recent deal with the manager even counts as a valid agreement. This internal battle is suddenly interrupted by a firm knock that brings him back to the present moment. He finds Juian standing there looking incredibly nervous and fidgety as she claims she needs his help with a very specific problem. Juho is confused by her sudden appearance, especially since she has been ignoring his messages for days. The atmosphere becomes heavy with an awkward silence as Juian trembles with a mix of fear and determination. The tension finally snaps when she lets out a thunderous shout that echoes through the room while making an incredibly bold and sussy request to have a hands-on experience with him. Juho is currently in a state of absolute disbelief, wondering if his childhood friend has perhaps had a bit too much to drink to be making such a bold and sussy request. Juian is quick to defend her sobriety, shouting that she is perfectly aware of what she is saying even though her face is as red as a ripe tomato. She frantically explains that this is not about her personal feelings, but rather a very specific requirement for her professional career. Juho is confused about what kind of job could possibly require such an sussy encounter until she finally reveals her secret identity as an sussy webtoon artist. The pieces of the puzzle finally start to click into place for Juho as he remembers her mentioning a script she was struggling to finish. Juian admits that she used their previous encounter as inspiration for her latest draft, and the editor was so impressed that they asked for an entire series based on that same realistic energy. She pleads with him for a bit more hands-on research because she simply cannot write about these deep things without having a genuine experience to draw from. Juho is initially quite hesitant, but he eventually lets out a heavy sigh and agrees to help her out strictly for the sake of her creative work. However, Juho decides that a fair trade is in order and suggests that he should be allowed to see some of her style in return. This causes another wave of embarrassment for Juian, who eventually agrees to a limited display as long as they stay within certain boundaries. The atmosphere in the room quickly returns to that high-stakes intensity as Juian provides a very sussy and detailed proof of her chosen outfit for the evening. Juho is visibly impressed by her taste, admitting to himself that her choices are even more captivating than the last time he saw them. Then they started a cardio session. The quiet evening between Juho and Juian is suddenly interrupted by a series of very loud and unmistakable sounds echoing from the next room. Juian immediately shoots a look of deep judgment toward Juho, assuming that he has gone back to his habit of downloading sussy videos on his computer. Juho is left frantically trying to defend his honor, while realizing with a sinking heart that his college classmates have returned to use his apartment for another intense cardio session. The situation becomes even more awkward as Juian remarks on how the sounds feel completely made up and unrealistic, only to realize that the source of the noise is actually coming from right across the balcony. The reality of the situation hits them both as they witness Chodan and his partner, Mint, engaging in their high-energy cardio activities with absolutely no regard for privacy. Juho is mortified as he watches Mint, who is currently sporting a very sussy bunny outfit, offer a cheerful greeting as if their presence is perfectly normal. Juian is left in a state of total shock, her brain struggling to process the sheer audacity of a couple who finds it exciting to do cardio while others are watching. She experiences a brief internal crisis where she imagines a traditional teacher from the past scolding her for witnessing such an outrageous display, leaving her feeling dizzy and completely overwhelmed by the modern world. Juho tries to reclaim his dignity by shouting that he would never dream of doing such things with someone he isn't in a committed relationship with. However, the moment the words leave his mouth, he is hit with a vivid flashback of his recent encounters with Ruri and the store manager. He realizes that he is being a total hypocrite and feels a massive wave of guilt as he acknowledges that his own life has become a series of unscripted cardio sessions with women he isn't technically being together with. He finds himself unable to look Juian in the eye as his own sussy history makes him feel like the biggest fraud in the room. The classmates remain entirely unfazed by the tension and even have the nerve to invite Juho and Juian to join in on the communal fun. Juho is ready to explode with frustration and tries to usher Juian away so she doesn't have to witness any more of the chaos. However, he suddenly realizes that this might be the perfect, albeit crazy, solution to Juian's creative struggles. He reminds her that she said she needed real-life inspiration for her webtoon and suggests that she should take this chance to observe the real thing in close detail. Juian is initially horrified by the suggestion and wonders if Juho has finally lost his mind, but her anger slowly turns into a strange and lingering curiosity. She finds herself gulping in anticipation, admitting to herself that while the situation is outrageous, she is actually very interested in seeing how it all works from a professional perspective. After their hands-on research session comes to an end, Juho and Juian sit in an awkward silence as the weight of the experience settles over them. Juho wonders aloud if the cardio encounter will actually be useful for her writing, while Juian fidgets nervously and admits she is not entirely sure how much it will help. Juho offers a quick apology, since he was only trying to be supportive of her career, but Juian manages a small smile and notes that it was definitely a very special experience. She promises to try and do something productive with the new inspiration as they eventually part ways for the night. Left alone in the quiet hallway, Juho scratches his head and wonders if he made the right choice by agreeing to such a sussy request. The next morning finds Juho walking through the city with a heavy heart and an even heavier conscience. His mind is a chaotic slideshow of all the women currently complicating his life, from his childhood friend to his bunny suit classmate and his intimidating new boss. He feels a massive wave of guilt because Ruri has been texting him all day and he hasn't been able to bring himself to reply. He wonders how he is supposed to face her at work when his brain is filled with so many conflicting memories. This internal crisis is suddenly interrupted when a pair of hands covers his eyes from behind and a familiar voice asks him to guess who is there. Juho is so startled that he lets out a loud and very ungraceful shout that draws the attention of everyone nearby. Ruri laughs at his terrified reaction and wonders why he is acting like such a scaredy cat. She looks as vibrant as ever in a stylish outfit with foxier accents, but her playful energy only makes Juho feel more conflicted. He initially snaps at her for being so scary, but he quickly realizes that he is the one who has been acting strangely. He tells himself that he shouldn't be getting angry at her when he is the one carrying around a mountain of secrets, and he walks into the store, feeling a deep sense of shame. Inside the quiet aisles of the shop, the tension between them is thick enough to cut with a price tag. Ruri points out that he hasn't said a single word to her all day and wonders if he is still holding a grudge over her previous prank with the black cardio cloth. Juho tries to brush it off, but his focus is entirely broken as he stares at the snack shelves. He realizes that he needs to quit his job immediately because of the deal he made with the manager, and the thought causes him to pause mid-reach. He eventually mumbles that he thinks he will have to quit, which causes Ruri to spin around with a look of pure disbelief. She demands to know what he could possibly mean by such a sudden announcement. Juho tries to find the right words to explain his complicated situation, but he is interrupted by the sight of Ruri, trembling with genuine anger. Her playful demeanor has completely vanished, replaced by a gaze that is sharp and accusing. The atmosphere turns freezing as she reveals that she knows exactly what has been going on behind her back. She stares him down with a look of betrayal and asks him if the rumors are true and if he really went so far as to do cardio with the store manager herself. Juho flinches as Ruri's gaze turns incredibly intense, making him realize that he is about to face a total disaster right in the middle of the snack aisle. The silence in the store is broken only by the steady ticking of the wall clock, while Ruri grits her teeth and tries to process the weight of his earlier words. Just as Juho prepares for a verbal explosion, she suddenly tells him to forget everything and simply follow her out of the shop. He is left in a state of total confusion until a chime from his phone reveals a text from Ruri directing him to a very specific address. He realizes with a start that he is headed right back to the billionaire mansion he visited just a few days prior. He arrives at the luxury estate panting for breath, only to find Ruri waiting for him with a look of pure determination. She drops a massive bombshell by revealing that she actually lives in this sprawling mansion herself, finally confirming the shared history between her and the manager. This revelation is quickly followed by the appearance of the store manager herself, who steps into the room wearing a very sussy green cloth that leaves Juho completely speechless. The air in the mansion turns freezing as the two women lock eyes in a silent battle of wills, leaving Juho to wonder how his evening managed to turn into a high-stakes family drama. Ruri wastes no time in shouting at her boss for being so meddlesome, while the manager remains perfectly calm and asks why she is so incredibly angry. The manager eventually reveals the sussy truth about her deal with Juho, noting that he only agreed to quit his job in exchange for a very intense cardio session with her. Juho is mortified as his secret is laid bare, but Ruri surprises them both by admitting that she already knows about their previous encounter. She explains that while she is annoyed by their sussy activities, what really makes her furious is the idea of the manager forcing Juho to leave his position at the store. Ruri decides to assert her own claim by grabbing Juho's arm and declaring that his popularity with women and his experience are exactly what she finds so attractive about him. This bold statement only seems to fuel the manager's competitive spirit as she wonders aloud if Ruri truly likes a man with that much experience. The manager decides to prove her own dominance in the most bold and sussy way possible. Juho and Ruri can only watch in stunned silence as the manager initiates a very public and sussy display. She leans into Juho, him into a very sussy cardio gesture, while Ruri stands right there, trembling with a mix of rage and betrayal. Juho finds himself in the middle of a very intense conversation, under the moonlight, as Ruri pointedly asks why he never seems to take the initiative, despite their previous cardio sessions. She wonders aloud if he even considers her to be his actual partner, especially since he never calls or asks her out on a proper outing. Juho is gripped by a sudden panic, his face turning a bright shade of red as he tries to find a way to explain his awkwardness without revealing his complicated social life. Ruri decides to take matters into her own hands by leaning in, demanding to know if they are truly a couple or if he is just playing around. Before he can provide a coherent answer, Ruri decides to leave a very permanent reminder of their relationship status. She catches him completely off guard by delivering a playful yet firm symbol on his body, giggling as she claims to be a vampire who has just tasted his blood. She tells him that this is exactly what he gets for hesitating so much before dashing away with a sussy grin. Juho is left alone in the quiet street, clutching his neck in total disbelief while realizing that he feels like a total fraud. He believes he has absolutely no right to be her partner when he is hiding so many sussy secrets, and he grits his teeth in frustration because he simply cannot be honest with her. Later that night, Juho attempts to find some peace in his own bedroom, staring up at the ceiling and reflecting on how strangely lucky yet complicated his life has become. Just as he starts to relax, a firm knocking at his balcony door brings him back to his chaotic reality. He is stunned to find his childhood friend, Juian, standing there in a very bold and sussy white cloth with a heart-shaped cutout. She mentions that she has been waiting all day for him to come home and excitedly hands him a stack of papers, revealing that she has finally finished her latest script. She admits, with a heavy blush, that their previous research session was incredibly inspiring and felt much better than she ever imagined. Juho sits on the edge of his bed and begins to read through the draft, noting that her writing has improved significantly since the last time they discussed her work. He mentions that he particularly enjoys the emotional depth in the scene where the male character finally confesses his true feelings, which causes Juian to sparkle with a mix of pride and joy. However, the cheerful atmosphere is instantly shattered when Juian leans in to get a closer look at the script. Her eyes widen in total shock as she spots the unmistakable sussy symbol on Juho's body that he completely forgot to hide. Her heart begins to thump wildly against her chest as the realization hits her that this is a symbol from another woman. Juho finds himself in quite the pickle as the evidence on his body starts a fire he was not ready to put out. Juyan's eyes widen with a mix of betrayal and pure fury, while Juho can only offer a weak and sweaty explanation that does nothing to calm her down. A stinging slap rings through the room as she demands to know if he is really seeing that girl from the convenience store. She reveals her true feelings by shouting that they have basically started going out and insists that she would never engage in such deep research with someone she did not have special feelings for. Juho is left completely stunned by this sudden confession of a relationship he did not even know he was in. After the initial explosion of emotions, a very heavy and awkward silence fills the small apartment. Juho eventually finds the courage to apologize for his messy social life, while Juyan admits that she might have been a bit too quick to use her hands. She tells him, with a visible blush, that he better not let anyone else leave symbols on him, because she will definitely get jealous. They manage to find a bit of peace as they move past the drama for the moment, but the tension of her confession still hangs in the air. Later, just as life seems to be settling into a new rhythm, Juho's phone buzzes with a notification that changes everything. He looks down to see that his enlistment date for the army has been finalized, leaving him in a state of absolute disbelief about his timing. The seasons change in the blink of an eye as he is sent off to fulfill his military duty, leaving his complicated relationships in a state of total limbo. One long year passes with him wearing a uniform and dreaming of home, while the girls are left to figure out their own feelings in his absence. Juho eventually makes it back to his apartment for a well-earned leave, looking much more rugged and tired than before. He flops onto the floor and hopes for a quiet rest, only to find a message from his mother saying she is currently on vacation and that he should just enjoy his time alone. The quiet is quickly shattered by a series of knocks that leave him wondering who could possibly be visiting a soldier on his first day back. He opens the door to find a sight that leaves him completely paralyzed with shock. Standing before him are Ruri and Juian, both looking incredibly stylish and more grown up than the last time he saw them. Ruri explains with a sussy grin that her mother actually called his commander to ensure he got a leave, showing just how far the store manager's influence reaches. Juho is terrified to think that his boss has the power to manipulate military orders just for a family reunion. He notices that the two girls seem strangely close, and they reveal that they have even started working at the same convenience store together. The atmosphere in the room takes a sudden and intense turn as both women reveal that they have reached a mutual understanding. They admit that they both like the same guy, and that it is finally time for Juho to make a definitive choice between them. Ruri is sporting a very bold black outfit with fox ears, while Juian wears a striking white dress that highlights how much she has changed over the year. Juho stands there in his camo uniform, looking like a deer caught in headlights as they wait for him to pick a winner. Juho's hesitation eventually reaches a point that neither girl is willing to tolerate. Ruri loses her patience entirely and declares that she will not wait another second. She lunges forward to claim her prize with a sussy gesture that leaves Juho's brain completely fried. Juian is not about to be left behind and decides that she will also become his partner right then and there. The apartment is soon filled with a chaotic and very high-energy cardio session as both women decide that sharing cardio with him is far better than waiting for him to make up his mind.